Good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank everybody for attending today. We're really excited to bring this panel to everyone out there. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Pierre Pine. I'm a partner at the entertainment litigation law firm McPherson LLP. I'm the chair of this program and a former chair of the BHBA's entertainment law section. I would like everyone to know that the executive committee for the entertainment law section is an open executive committee to all BHBM members. We meet first Wednesday of every month, currently virtually. And our next meeting is this Wednesday, April 7th at 8:30 a.m. I encourage any BHBA members who are interested in meeting attorneys in the entertainment field and helping put together great programs like this one to come join our group. Our next program is the silver linings of the Weinstein Company bankruptcy, which will take place on Wednesday, April 21st. A couple things. First, I'd like to thank our media sponsor, Variety. I'd also like to thank the IP and new media section for co-sponsoring this event. I want to thank Dina for helping put together this great panel and all our panelists for being a part of it. CLE certificates will be circulated after the program within about 24 hours, and everyone should have already received their program materials this morning. We've got a lot of topics we want to cover, so we're going to leave 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. I see we've already got questions coming in, so please don't be alarmed if we don't get to those during the program, but we are leaving time for that. I've been part of the entertainment law section for a while now, and we've long prided ourselves on our ability to tackle timely subjects and present programs often on short notice, covering highly in-demand topics, and this program is no exception. As is often the case when it comes to the use of non-fungible tokens, also known as NFTs, and cryptocurrencies, the law is well behind the technology. This program is not our typical CLE program, where the panelists can easily provide an overview and explanation of the law on the subject. In this case, in the case of NFTs, our panelists will truly be wading into uncharted territory and providing information to try to help better develop this area of law and put together best practices for attorneys and clients who may be trying to navigate things such as regulatory issues and other intellectual property concerns that the use of NFTs are beginning to present, and specifically as it pertains to art and music. I quickly want to introduce our panel. We've got a lot of stuff to cover, so I'm going to keep the introductions very light. Everybody here has fantastic bios that are included in the material, so I recommend everybody in attendance take a look at those. First, Dean Wilson. Dean is the CEO and founder of 720, a technology and entertainment company. Through the freedom of blockchain, 720 seeks to push the entire music and entertainment industry forward with new IP and equity deals only possible with this technology. Irene Lee. Irene is a partner at Russ, August, and Cabot, where she has focused her practice on all aspects of intellectual property. We have Jim Gatto. Jim is a partner in the intellectual property practice group in the Washington, D.C. office of Shepard, Mullen, Richter, and Hampton. He's a leader of the blockchain and fintech team, social media and games team, and open source team. And last but certainly not least, Dina Lapolt, who's going to be moderating today. Dina is the founder and owner of Lapolt Law PC, one of the music industry's leading law firms. We also will be having Joel Zimmerman, also known as Deadmau5, joining later in the program. And he's obviously, everyone knows, he's an internationally acclaimed electronic music producer and musician. And with that, I will let Dina take it away.
Thanks, Pierre. Thanks to the Beverly Hills Bar Association and, of course, Variety for sponsoring the panel. Thank you to my panelists. All right, let me get right into it because we have a lot of information to cover in a short period of time. So non-fungible tokens, NFT, it's a digital token. Non-fungible means it cannot be replaced. NFTs are essentially digital collectibles and include such items such as stickers, game skins, artwork, sound recordings, even musical compositions. The buyers purchase ownership of the NFT, which lives on the blockchain. Blockchain technology is a publicly accessible, transparent ledger that records the history of a digital asset, which is contained in a smart contract. Well, NFTs use the same cryptocurrency technology, such as Bitcoin. The key difference is NFTs are each one of a kind, and this scarcity is where the value comes from. Most NFT use the Ethereum blockchain, and a smart contract is not something sitting on your lawyer's desk waiting to be looked at, okay? It's a computer code that holds all the information relating to the token and how to trade it. Smart contracts can be easily deployed on the blockchain and therefore can be tied to the NFT. They're created by computer programs that automatically execute transactions or other events related to the NFT. An NFT is created or minted, as they say, when someone writes the smart contract that governs it before adding it to the blockchain. And because a smart contract generally essentially tracks the life of the NFT, it creates the potential for revenue sharing from the NFT resale. Make sure terms with all the co-creators are finalized before the smart contract is deployed on the blockchain, because once smart contracts are deployed, they are nearly impossible to modify once established. And when a buyer creates an NFT, it's important to note that the buyer is not purchasing the underlying intellectual property embodied on the NFT. This is an area that we have to still flush out in the industry to make sure that buyers understand this. And we're all talking about this stuff now. So this is all in real time. Okay. Essentially, everybody needs to be cleared. Did you hear that? Everybody needs to be cleared. Visual artists, songwriters, other music creators, record companies, music publishers. If an NFT features the name and likeness of somebody, like an old band from the 70s or, you know, Mickey Mouse from Disney, it all needs to be cleared. Don't be putting all these images of the DC Marvel comics together, think you're going to be selling an NFT, and then these people are going to come at you. Okay, this is a collectibles business. So collectibles. So all these record companies that think they're going to make all this money and they're trying, it's like, no, you're not going to make all this money in the music. And we're going to talk about this in a minute. Okay. Where the record companies will make the money, in my opinion, is all their historical artwork and all these vintage photo shoots of photographs that were never published. 50 years. Okay, this is the stuff that will drive the sales of NFT. Now, what are the rights that are implicated in the NFT, right? How to classify all this under the US Copyright Act? Well, free market, my favorite word when it comes, 2 words when it comes to creators. Free market, okay? Title 17 of the United States Code, Section 1062, my favorite part of the entire Copyright Act is the derivative use portion, okay? It says the owner of copyright under this title has the exclusive rights to do and authorize any of the following. Number 2, to prepare derivative works based upon the copyrighted work. That's what we're talking about here. For visual and fine artists, okay, the 1990 Visual Artists' Rights Act, otherwise known as VERA, thanks to Congressman Robert Kastenmeier of Wisconsin, who lobbied and authored to get this done, which is also codified in Section 106, okay, of the U.S. Copyright Act, 106A. This statute protects the rights of visual artists to the attribution of their work and protects them from being attributed to works they did not create. It prohibits any intentional distortion, mutilation, or modification of their work. So all this stuff is really, really important. So for music artists out there, if there's an NFT that is being driven by the visual artist and they want to include your work, they've got to clear the music. And at first you should figure out what the overall percentage of music is attributable to the entire NFT. And once you establish what that is, okay, then you clear both sides, just like a film. The recording and the artist and the producer, what is the recording going to generate? You know, what is that going to clear for? What is the underlying musical composition going to clear for? Now, sometimes the recording doesn't include musical compositions. It includes sounds, beep, bop, boop, bop, bop. Pay attention to your exclusive recording agreement. If you look at the definition of sound recordings, it usually includes these sounds, like any sound that's embodied on a recording. That's important to know, okay, when you're going to go beat up your record company. Make sure you know what's included in sound recording. But most importantly, this is all free market, which is why, to me, it is so riveting and exciting. So getting to that, I want to talk about the business of an NFT. So we get the landscape of how it's created and how it gets distributed. So Dean Wilson, you've been doing this for a few years with deadmau5, who is one of the people at the forefront of this industry. Explain to us when you create the NFT and then how it's distributed and what these platforms are.
So not to go too far down a rabbit hole, and thanks Dina and everybody else, I will keep it pretty high level. There are multiple platforms emerging on a daily basis, but here's the top 5 really as we see it right now. Wax.io is the eminent trading card platform. When I mean by trading card, think of your old basketball tradable cards or Pokemon cards that are turned into digital versions of those collectible cards, and they're sold in blind packs digitally. Then you open them up and then you can trade them, swap them and sell them on a secondary market. Wax.io is the eminent platform there. With the other big one is NBA Top Shots. NBA Top Shots has done nearly $1 billion since launch 7 or 8 months ago. That is been made by a company called Dapper Labs, which were originally one of the very first platforms that did crypto kitties, if everybody remembers that. They have raised $320 million as of last week. So if anybody thinking that this was just some kind of hype bubble, there is a frothy bubble right now, yes, with people fishing for crypto whales, but this is a real business. And what we're seeing right now and the emergence of outside of the noise, as I call it right now, will be the NFT business that will be with us in every capacity of our lives. I am absolutely sure of that. Buying, selling houses, cars, and everything else where a smart contract can live. So on top of that, the eminent noise platform, as I call it right now, is Nifty Gateway. That is owned by Gemini, which is the Winklevoss twins. And they bought that back in 2019. And underneath that, you've got Maker's Place, you've got Super Rare, you've got Rareable, you've got OpenSea, and then you've got new platforms that are just about to come online called Palm.io, which is I think is going to be very disruptive in the marketplace. These are the guys that own, or they have a company called Consensus, which is one of the biggest blockchain companies in the world, worth billions. And their CEO was number 2, Ethereum, and he is the leading eminent expert at Ethereum 2.0, which eventually what Dina says about gas fees, which is going to change the way Ethereum runs and make it much more easier to trade without large gas fees. And what I mean by gas fees, they're a transactional fee, like a credit card transactional fee. Those fees are generated by nodes, which are computers that manage the smart contract. And I know we're going to get into that a little bit later, but I'll keep on where I'm going. And then basically what you're seeing in the evolution of is what is fiat versus DeFi. Fiat means can I onboard onto a blockchain with USD? And that means credit cards or debit cards. And then is there a bridge onto the blockchain? Is what most platforms are calling the bridge onto crypto blockchain. That's called DeFi because everything's decentralized in that marketplace. And a lot of these platforms some of these platforms take USD, they then bridge it across to their blockchain and whatever they are trading on their platform. So if we take NBA Top Shots, they built their own blockchain called Flow, and that trades on Flow and a bridge on and off with USD. If we take Nifty Gateway, they do it slightly differently. You can onboard with US dollars and they then turn it onto Ethereum, but they do it all manually. So when we talk about minting, what happens with the ERC token is it's individually minted per sale. So if Dina buys an NFT and that ERC token is individually minted to that purchaser. Now, how Nifty do it is they do it all per drop. Now, what I mean by drops is each platform, as again, it's very complicated. It can get very complicated very quickly. Each platform does it in a slightly different way currently. There is no industry standard to how people are doing or selling or dropping NFTs, as you might hear the words all the time. It basically, I can do an NFT right on myself right now on OpenSea and Maker's Place. I can open my own digital wallet, say like a MetaMask. I can then make my NFT. I link my MetaMask wallet to my account on Maker's Place or OpenSea. I do my artwork. I upload it up. And if you're doing a one-on-one, at that point, it's then minted by you as the owner of that piece of artwork. And if it's a one-on-one, then somebody else purchases that, and then there's the transaction. But again, I think the guys will get into the legality of that transaction and ownership as that goes down the line. But then that sits on the smart contract, and there's the protection for everybody because it's completely transactional and transparent at that point. Now, when we get into the big numbers that are being created out of like Nifty Gateway, where you get Grimes $6 million and Mad Dog Jones 4 million, and there's some other real big numbers which we are classing right now as whale fishing. These are crypto billionaires who are spending exorbitant amounts of money on art and having a piece of fun, which with kind of like house money, if you say it, they've all made an absolute fortune from crypto over the years. That's not really where the business is heading. The everyday business, what I call it, is what you're seeing on Wax and what you're seeing on NBA Top Shots, when the entry point is inclusive, not exclusive. But Nifty Gateway do it slightly differently. So if you're doing a drop on Nifty Gateway and you have 4 pieces of art, they like to talk about as open edition. An open edition means that you have an open amount of time for one piece of art, and there's an entry point to that piece of art. So let's say it's $500 to enter to buy art piece number 1. Now, for the open editions on Nifty Gateway, it's open for 5 minutes. And for 5 minutes, you can sell as many as are purchased in that 5-minute allocation. And at the end of that allocation, it ends. So you may sell 250, you might sell 2, you might sell 1,000 at $500. Then they take it away and then they mint it. And then some point within 24 or 48 hours later, you actually get what you purchased. It's not instantaneous like a one-on-one purchase would be on Maker's Place, because they bundle their packages together, then they drop them onto the blockchain as a bundle to reduce gas fees on Ethereum. Now, those are then there's different variations off the back of that. So you can then do auctions, 24-hour auctions that you can do. You can do blind auctions, which is an entry point, but nobody can see who's bidding what. The top bidder eventually wins. It's completely blind, and it'll run. Again, you can have that run for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 24 hours. And the same with the open auction as well. That can also do the same. Now, that just really scratching the surface for you guys here about the platforms, the gas side of it, the crypto side of it versus fiat versus DeFi. And I think the other thing is the environmental impact that everybody is starting to talk about NFTs not being environmentally friendly. It's a very interesting point, and there's a lot of people talking about it. And I think the explosion or the evolution of platforms like Palm.io and the evolution of Ethereum 2.0 will have a dramatic impact on that environmental impact of the nodes. A node is an IP address, and when we talk about mining and farming, this is what they call the large impact of energy use within those mining or farms, and they're trying to bring those costs down with Ethereum 2.0. Again, I won't get too much into that because we could go down all kinds of rabbit holes here, really. I think the art versus music, pop culture, I feel like we're seeing the evolution of that bubble burst a little bit right now. From, a month ago, 6 weeks ago, you were seeing crazy numbers. Halsey, 9 million, Grimes, 6 million. The Weeknd did what was expected to be the biggest drop of them all at the weekend and did 2 million. So I think what we're starting to see now is what we always thought was the bubble, not burst, but it's becoming more about actually what is the business of NFTs now, and the art and the music side of it. We haven't even seen the start of the music side. I know myself, Dina, and Jim and Irene were talking about something that came out of the UK about fractionalized ownership of musical parts and rights. And again, I'm not going to get into that because that's not my legal position. But I'm fascinated by where we're going to go with music into NFTs, and I think we're going to see some really exciting things over the coming weeks and months with regards to how music stems, parts are able to bring in your fan community and be inclusive. And not be exclusive, just fishing for whales. I think that's, from my point, that's just a high level point. We're actually starting a new company called Pixel Links in a week's time, which will share more information over probably by the end of the week, which was helping people navigate futurizing all virtual properties that you might have, whether it be an NFT, whether it be your name, your likeness, whether it be for athletes, whether it be for musicians, and turning into avatar and getting yourself ready for blockchain Web3 into the metaverse ready. That is the true explosion that I think we're going to see in the NFT world, is blockchain video games. There are probably 4 or 5 we know of that are going to explode out of E3 in June, which will be obviously virtual this year. But you'll see the likes of Sandbox, you'll see Blanco's Block Party, you've seen what's happened with Decentralized Land. These are going to be platforms that will have massive NFT business within the game. And that is going to be really an explosion into the video game inside of the NFT business, outside of what the platforms you're just seeing right now.
Thanks, Dean. I'm going to have Jim jump in, but before that, I just want to clarify something, because we have Professor Jay Doherty that's, listening to us. Hello, Jay. And he wanted to clarify that a sound recording must contain original contributions to be copyrightable, and he's absolutely correct. But again, look in your record contract, because the record contract, the definition of sound recording most definitely overreaches this. Okay, so I wanted to clarify that. Not that that would be copyrightable, but most recording agreements include language that says any sounds of anything like this, they have exclusive right and title to. So please check that. Okay, Jim, can you jump in on what Dean's saying? If you can, give us any of your experience with any of this stuff.
Sure. Yeah, so Dean, you did a great job of talking about the many different aspects of the emerging business models around NFTs. I agree with him. I think that this is a huge new opportunity. We're at the beginning rather than the end of kind of what's happening, but despite people talking about a bubble. And I think when you think about it, I mean, you did a great job, Dean, of talking about what NFTs and smart contracts are. If you kind of boil it down to even just a simpler look, is that the NFT is really just a digital way of managing and recording on a blockchain ownership of some asset. And the NFT points to some asset. So it could be a digital media file, it could be actual real estate, it could be anything. And so in part, when we look at kind of how we analyze these issues, there's the token piece of it and the legal issues that go around the ownership rights. And then there's the underlying file and the license or ownership of that file. Most of the time it's a license. So I think as we talk through the legal issues here today, we'll kind of, in some cases, make a distinction between what the token represents versus the underlying media file.
Irene, do you want to weigh in on anything that Dean said?
Yeah, so thank you so much, by the way, Dean. Every time I listen to her, I feel like my IQ just goes up by 10 points. So I appreciate that. So I'm an IP attorney, and this is one area that I have to admit I have to study a lot just to understand what most of my clients are talking about. However, the beauty of this as a practitioner is the law hasn't caught up with the technology. The law is still the same, and a lot of time we're squeezing the existing law into fast-moving technology. So when Dina, when you're talking about Section 106, that hasn't changed just because then it's NFT. So, 101 definition, work made for hire. I saw a question about termination. So I think one of the things that when I think of intellectual property rights surrounding this NFT blockchain, I think of, patent, we have trademark, and then there's like name and likeness for right of publicity issues. And then we talk about copyright, trade secrets. I think undoubtedly, copyright is the one area that is implicated the most. So when we're talking about copyright, I appreciate, Jim, like the NFT literally is the digital management, and there's underlying creative work. And then a lot of time when people are buying NFT, they think they own the underlying intellectual property associated with the creative work, and that is not the case. I think that's one thing that we have to advise our clients as they're investing in a lot of NFTs out there. And NFT is pointing at the underlying work. And sometimes the NFT is residing in one server database, and there is a creative work residing in another repository. And then we probably heard some stories about people, they spend like $500 or $5,000 on NFT, only to find out that there's no record of this. So I think those are the areas that we do want to explore a little bit, but staying within the intellectual property, I'll go into kind of my analysis that I do with clients. So usually we have clients in the creative side, the artist. And Dina said it perfectly. Copyright, all the rights, there are bundles of rights here. And then just because you think you own the rights, you may not be the sole and exclusive owner of that underlying copyright. So we talked about this artist named Mike Winkelmann, known as Bibble. And he was able to sell this artwork through Christie's auction house for $69.3 million, which is a lot. However, when you think about what he sold, is a one JPEG with 5,000 underlying works that he's done since May 2007. So 5,000 artworks, he compile that into one collage. That's why it's $69.3 million. And then you can visually expand one work at a time to see what he's done for the last 5,000 days. And the beauty of it is he owns underlying rights to individual artwork. That is not going to be the case in most cases. So when we're talking about audio-visual work, there's a visual side of it, there's an audio side of it, and then who compiled it. I think you have to find out, do I own this right? And then going back to the record contract that nobody wants to read, now you have to dust it off and read that thing to understand whether you even have the exclusive right. And also a lot of artists may have like a partnership agreement, marketing agreement, some license agreement that they granted. And some of those agreements have some provisions where you already grant exclusivity as to certain categories of products or services. So if you are thinking about licensing your work for something else, make sure that it's not going to violate any existing license provisions. So when we are talking about artists, when we're talking about creators, I think those are the areas that we need to be mindful of. Another thing that I see a lot, the work made for hire. A lot of folks who are commissioned to create works. And just because that agreement and you got paid, it doesn't necessarily mean that you transfer your copyright to someone else. However, if there's a magic word, work made for hire, you might want to look at it a little more carefully. And work made for hire, it has to fall under one of the 9 categories. It has to be like as part of translation, supplementary work, or collective work for audiovisual. You have to just make sure you understand what that means. If you're an employee for some big studio, you're a graphic artist for Disney, and you created something a long time ago, it's likely that you don't have a copyright to mint that are into NFT, because usually studios, they own those copyrights. And also you probably signed some agreements saying that you transfer, even if it doesn't have the work made for hire, you probably assigned. Usually the employees sign this invention assignment agreement when you during the orientation. So you probably want to check that as well. So one of the things that you might see in this area is the copyright preemption, as the people may try to enforce some of the employment agreements. So that's one area that I usually look into. Fair use. That's something that you may hear a lot more these days. In fact, the Supreme Court just came down this morning in the Google versus Oracle. So Supreme Court is a different context. We're talking about Java API. However, the Supreme Court actually went through the fair use analysis instead of addressing the issue of whether the Java itself was copyright protectable. So I think that's worth looking at. So it just literally came down this morning. When I advise clients who are thinking of minting their underlying creative work to NFT, one thing that I still advocate, and now I do it a little more zealously, is try to register your copyright. So as of March 2019, in order to have a copyright infringement claim, you actually have to have your underlying work copyright registered. So even before you do send out like takedown notice, cease and desist letters, it is advisable to have at least the application in place. Filing fee is $65 per application. So some folks may not want to go there, but if you try to expedite it, is $800. So a lot of times the clients come to you, they think that their right is violated by this NFT. We look at it, it's like, oh yeah, it's definitely infringement there. However, we ask the client, is this copyright registered? They usually tell me it is registered with these organizations. I was like, no, Copyright Office. It's like, no. Especially it's really common when you're talking to folks outside of the United States. They think just because they register with some, the industry organization, they think that it's copyright registered. It's not the case. So one thing that we try to advise a client to do is do it early. That way you can take advantage of the statutory damages and attorney's fees, not because you want the client to file a lawsuit and win a trial, but it really changes the dynamics of settlement discussions or license discussions. And it really forces your client to really try to figure out that, do they even own the copyright? Because you have to identify the author, you have to identify the claimant, you have to identify any existing works in the underlying work. So it's a good exercise. It really forces your client to really audit their inventory. So that's one thing that I discuss with a client quite a bit. Before I move on, I do want to touch upon the license terms, because one thing I appreciate Dean and Dina and Jim, you guys talking about the inclusiveness. I think there are a lot of artists out there who are not readily recognized, and recognized meaning appreciated by royalty rates, royalty payment. And the headlines we read about, these are like people $69.3 million. Those are the ones that we hear. However, we don't really hear about all these artists who are not fully compensated. I think this is one way for us to democratize this kind of fancy, artsy, Christie auction house. Now, instead of think of eBay meeting Christie's auction house with some, digital currency. And I think this is one way for us to kind of help some of our, the clients who probably have a more feature. So one thing that I usually discuss with the client in the license is, because there's already built-in secondary market. So like Beeple guy, he sold this one work for 69.3 million. When there's a resale, he is going to get 10% of that. By the way, Christie's auction house, they got 15% of this.
Right.
100 million.
They did well.
So, yes. But before this particular work, Beeple also put out 100 of his other work, identical pieces out there for $1 each. Those are now being sold as 6 figures easily. And every time there's a resale, there's a 10% hitting his digital wallet every time. So this is one way to figure out how you go about getting a royalty paid to our artist clients in the resale.
To interrupt quick, Irene, this is why I keep calling it, it's almost like sample clearance, right? Because when you're clearing a song for a sample and you don't like the terms, then don't use that song. Right? So it's like free market. So if you're sampling Stevie Wonder and he wants a portion of the copyright and they want an advance and they want a royalty on the master and you don't like that, then don't sample Stevie Wonder. So it's the same thing with this. We have to set best practices so that the creators are paid for their contributions.
Well, there's also a point there, Irene, with people that people are now saying that Nintendo are contemplating some kind of action because his interpretation of Pokemon characters and other characters that he uses in his artwork. And again, this legal adaptation of art into another artist's form of it is huge in the art world.
Well, that's where fair use comes in. You have to look, is the work transformative? There's established tests. And again, I think to simplify some of this, put in the NFT part aside, whatever the digital media file is that you're creating the token for, you have to do the same exact clearance as Dina is saying and Irene is saying, as if it was any other media file, because that's what you're essentially doing is you're licensing that instance to somebody. And if you don't have all the rights you need in that instance, then you've got a problem.
Yeah. So, but go ahead, continue, Irene, because I thought that was interesting.
So, yes. So going back to Beeple, as you can see, I'm like obsessed with this. He did have a lot of Pixar Disney characters, like a Buzz Lightyear completely naked. He has many of those. Kim Jong-un with big breasted, but Buzz Lightyear outfit. So you could see Disney, Pixar, Nintendo kind of lurking around and seeing whether there is a copyright claim or whether all this work is protected under fair use doctrine. So I think that's something we're going to see a lot of. The next bucket of folks that we represent, collectors and buyers, as we are mentioning over and over, owning an NFT, first of all, that's not really what it is the creative work associated with NFT. That's what you're buying. That does not come with the copyright, the underlying intellectual property. I think that's something that we have to emphasize and explain to our clients who think that they're buying something. So just because you bought something, go ahead.
Correct. No, I want to just bring this up because this is a big issue that we're trying to figure this out now. Like there needs to be some kind of terms and conditions, but it's moving. It's such a quick moving industry, but this I feel is going to be a big issue, what you're alluding to, because people that are buying these NFTs that think they own the underlying intellectual property, how are we going to disclose that this is not the case?
Well, on the initial sale, it's easy, right? So whatever marketplace it's being sold on, you can there's terms of service for the marketplace, and then there can be customized terms for an individual work. So the initial license you're granting, or the initial terms of what you're granting, should be specified in one of those two places. And if someone is going to buy an NFT, they should log in and have to accept the terms of service. So I think on the initial sale, if you do it right, it's not hard. The question is, how do you enforce the rights? How do you ensure that the rights follow? And that's kind of where I think there's, that you can reference in the NFT terms of service or license conditions and metadata, but then you have the question of, does a subsequent purchaser, depending on where they buy it, do they affirmatively accept those terms or not? And that's kind of, I think, an open issue, and that's kind of still being evolved. But one other point on that I want to mention, and Irene touched on this earlier, but I don't know, some of you may remember Second Life back in the when virtual worlds were a big thing. They got sued at one point because they were saying you can own virtual land, you can own this, you can own that, and they were using the word ownership. And a lot of NFT companies are using the word own a one of one or own a unique work. And at the end of the day, Second Life got sued because what actually they were granting was a license under their platform to that land or whatever the instance was. And when people got their accounts shut down and lost the value of it, they sued. There was a class action against them because what they were stating from a business perspective and what their terms of service covered and what people actually were getting were different. And I think this is going to happen here again too, because there's a lot of sites and marketplaces that are stating things in a way that sound like you have true ownership, including potentially of the underlying copyright in a work. And in most cases, that's not the case. So clarity of the business model and ensuring the license associated with the platform or the instance that's being sold is critical.
That's important. I want to get to like the regulatory challenges before we have Deadmau5 sign on. So Jim, I want to get into this because we know we have two important cases that are right now pending in the SEC, and those are imminently going to be decided. And so go through this with us, the different regulatory challenges.
So the cases you're referring to are under securities laws. So for any of you who have followed cryptocurrency for a while, there were a lot of ICOs or initial coin offerings that happened in the 2017, 18, 19 timeframe. And a lot of them, when you look at securities law analysis, they fell under the scope of US securities laws, and people didn't comply with the securities laws. And so the SEC has issued guidance, and they've taken enforcement actions, including in the Ripple case and Telegram, which were two of the big cases. Telegram ended up, initially they raised about $1.2 billion selling cryptocurrency, and they ended up, instead of fighting the case, they ended up folding. The short of it on the security side is this. I think Irene mentioned before, the law that's being applied, there's really not a lot of new law that applies to NFTs. The SEC applies this case called the Howey case. It was decided back in the 40s, a 19 Supreme Court case, that under the definition of security, under US securities law, includes a term that's called investment contract. And that's the part of the securities laws that the SEC has been primarily relying on. And essentially, it's a four-part test. If there's an investment of money in a common enterprise with an expectation of profits that derive from the efforts of others, if those things are met, then you have a security. In many cases, the SEC has taken the position that if a platform is selling a token before the platform is built, and you can't immediately use the token, that people are basically buying the token for future appreciation rights. And because everyone has a common interest in that platform and they're relying on the platform developer to create the value, it's a security. That's an oversimplification. The short answer is, with both NFTs and any other type of token, if you're dealing with them, you should get an analysis of whether they are or not a security under securities law. The couple of other big regulatory issues from a tax perspective, the IRS has issued guidance on cryptocurrency gains and token gains. They've been issuing subpoenas over the last couple of years now to Coinbase and some of the other marketplaces and exchanges where people are doing this. They've added to your tax form a box you have to check that says, have I done any cryptocurrency trades? And they're coming hard this year. Starting this year, they'll be coming hard after people who are not reporting. So if you have the short answer is, the way they've taken the position is that if you acquire a cryptocurrency or a token at $1, and you either sell it for another cryptocurrency or fiat, or you trade it for something else, even a different crypto token, that has a higher value at the time of the trade, that's a gain in there, and you have to report that gain, even if you don't cash it out to real money if you convert it to another crypto. So definitely get tax advice on that. It's complicated, but the IRS has been clear that they're coming down on that. A couple other one other interesting area, I think, of securities law that applies to, particularly with digital art, is that there's two kind of business models that have emerged that can implicate securities laws. One is referred to as pooling, and the other is fractionalization. And so pooling is taking a collection of NFTs or pieces of digital media and creating a single NFT around it. And it can be digital media owned by one person, or it can be multiple people that they package together, essentially a bundle of art, and create an NFT, a single token around that. Depending on how that's managed and structured, that can implicate securities laws. And so can fractionalization, which is kind of the opposite. So if you have a very high valued work and you want to divide the ownership, you can create multiple NFTs that represent a share of the ownership in that work. And again, depending on how the revenue is divided and if there's management layers, et cetera, the fractionalization can lead to SEC issues as well. The other kind of real quick, two big areas that are worth noting from a regulatory perspective. One is the role of FinCEN in administering the Bank Secrecy Act and all the anti-money laundering provisions that fall under that. FinCEN was actually the first regulatory agency to issue guidance back in 2012 on convertible virtual currencies or cryptocurrencies, and they basically position that if you're exchanging one crypto for another, if that's your service, you're a money transmitter, and unless one of the 6 exceptions applies, you have to comply you have to register with FinCEN, and you may be subject to state money transmitter licensing laws. It's a pretty complex area. Whether the exceptions apply are sometimes complex as well. But if you are involved in any of those types of activities, you should definitely seek legal counsel, because it's very fact specific. There's also kind of related to money laundering is OFAC and sanctions avoidance. So the Office of Foreign Assets Control has issued a paper that even with regular art, not just NFT based art, that there's evidence of money laundering and high value art. There was just a modification to the Bank Secrecy Act at the end of last year. There was a proposed amendment to include art dealers in the definition of financial institutions that would be subject to the Bank Secrecy Act. They ended up including antiquity dealers, but not art dealers, but they're doing a further study, and they likely will amend FinCEN or the Bank Secrecy Act to include art dealers. But even though they're not specifically included, if you fall within the definition of a money transmitter, you're subject to those regulations anyhow. So you need to be careful about that. And OFAC deals with sanctions avoidance. So for the same, kind of analogous reasons for anti-money laundering, there are individuals and countries that have been designated as subject to sanctions and can't access certain financial systems. They have been using high value art and other things to avoid that as a currency, essentially, and to circumvent those sanctions. OFAC is taking a hard look at that. The last kind of regulatory issue I'll talk about is gambling. So a lot of people initially thought that if you created a blockchain-based gambling platform, because it was decentralized, which we've used that term a couple of times, but basically what it means is that a decentralized platform, there's not really a single entity that runs it. There's a network, there's software that manages the transactions, and that's part of what these smart contracts are. But there's not really necessarily an entity that runs it once the smart contracts are deployed. On the gambling side, it doesn't matter if it's decentralized. All the agencies I've talked about have issued guidance that said that if you deploy a smart contract, you're responsible for the legal consequences and the regulatory issues that flow from that. So if what you're deploying is a gambling platform, particularly if the smart contract is designed to pay you a percentage as each transaction occurs, that's going to be even clearer that you're going to have a problem. But using cryptocurrency does not change the fact if you're dealing with something that's otherwise gambling, which typically is someone is risking money and there's some chance-based determination of whether they win money or something else of value, that's gambling in general. And that something else of value can be cryptocurrency, crypto tokens, or anything else. We've seen a lot of game companies, traditional video game companies, being sued for loot boxes, because of the people paying money and a chance-based element of whether you're going to get a rare item or a non-rare item, et cetera. So the gambling issues are front and center. And are particularly relevant in the blockchain game space, but we've seen other platforms that have them kind of more traditional gaming models, and then there's this hybrid of skill-based games that can still be gambling. So I'll leave it there, Dina, but that's just kind of a real quick overview. The short answer is, if you're getting involved in this space, or you have clients that are getting involved, you really need to, at the very beginning, when you put together the business plan, get it vetted by a lawyer who understands the potential issues and flag the issues that might arise. And, it's hard for one lawyer to deal with all these issues, but having folks who can, analyze the issues and understand what they are, as a head of the blockchain team where I am, that's a big part of what I do. And then I'll bring in specialists on the different areas as we kind of dig into the issues deeper.
Thanks, Jim. That was great. And now we have Joel on here. See, Joel, every time you get mad at me that I have to be, that I have to keep hiring more lawyers, this is why. This is why I got to hire all these lawyers. Things. What's that? You keep inventing all this new shit. Am I allowed to say that? Anyway, so Joel, welcome. I'm so happy you're here. You have been doing this now for a couple of years. It's hit the precipice. Can you explain, I want to tell everybody how you started doing your physical pins, your collectibles 10 years ago, and then how you started doing that into how now you're doing these digital collectibles.
Right. Well, I mean, I think we're following kind of the same model with the digital as we started out with the physical, meaning that we did manufacture pins, right, of all these varieties, and then we would have like a kind of scarcity model involved in some rare pins and stuff like that. And what we found was we teamed up with I think Merch Roadie was first, and then we hired these vending machines basically at venues, and then while the openers playing or people are just kind of shuffling into the venue, they would walk through the gauntlet of merch, and these vending machines were part of that, and they distributed these pins. So it kind of became at first, honestly, I thought it was weird. I was like, pins, really? That's weird. Don't ever remember buying a pin, and well, what actually happened was we then kind of saw it as a social activity, which was pretty interesting. So people were buying pins and then meeting and making new friends there, doing like on the spot pin exchanges, where it's like, oh, I've got this one, I've got a double of this one. Hi, my name's so-and-so. And then they trade pins and whatever from that. So I kind of view NFTs in the same light. To a degree, where it's like, whether it's like a minute one of one or open auction or something like that, it's just kind of creating this social activity of collecting. It has nothing to do, well, it has, something to do with the art or the meta in question, but the tokenization aspect is just kind of just the irrefutable provenance. And those are the two key components to the NFT, basically. And obviously, everyone's all hog wild on, oh, but it's irrefutable provenance, and you can't deny that, and you can't question that. And I'm like, well, I mean, yeah, I get that, and I am excited about that, and there are some legal and technical implications that could arise from that technology. But I got tweets from 10 years ago, that are researchable, and they're saying, well, if it's on the blockchain, it's on, and you can't erase it. And I'm like, have you read my Twitter? You can't erase that either. There's a million technologies out there that are just so popular or whatever, and have these staying powers where you can put property on the internet and it just stays there some way or another. Of course, there's a chance it could go out. But anyway, so with the NFT things, it's just like a kind of a window into this use of that technology. Right, where we're going to start seeing, blockchain audio and stuff like that, where, these files are, music is kind of living on the world computer or little chunks here and there on different servers and all that stuff, but it's existing and being tokenized in those, on those physical servers and people's computers and stuff like that, where it's like, that's great, because that basically replaces the need for SoundScan or IRSE or any of that other stuff. But now what I'm noticing, just the NFT thing is such a small niche of kind of the uses for blockchain technology and stuff like that. And obviously we've been playing around with NFTs because of basically off the success of these pin things we had, because it's a social activity. There's a little community around there that's, all, into the collecting and the one-of-ones. And I got the lowest edition. I got the last edition. I paid this for this edition. It's literally the pin show, but happening on the internet. And nothing new to the traditional art world pre-COVID. But what I am interested in learning and seeing change in is how IP law is going to come into play here. Because I actually noticed a few things. I mean, we won't, start pointing fingers and stuff like that. But for example, a very prominent artist kind of used the same clip art as another prominent artist. And you know what I mean? And now which one of them has the right to claim, ownership over that? I mean, clearly, if you were dealing commercial art or making music and stuff like that, all that stuff is very quantifiable by, ultimately, if it ends up in court, by a musicologist who will say, this is the quantifying factor that makes this the original jerk chicken, and therefore you lose. Have a great day, sir. And then damages and But with art, it gets weird.
Joel, because with you, what I want to tell everybody, specifically, you're independent, which is amazing to have represent you, where you own and control all your own copyrights. And that is not traditionally everybody's reality.
Correct.
But I want to talk to you about the visual artist aspect, what you're just talking about. Like, you partner up with people like Mad Dog Jones and OG Slick, and you do a deal with them, which is basically co-creator deal to create these NFTs, and you do it all in the right way, and it's all your music anyway. You know what I mean? So you know what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, if anything, I would like to signal that that's the way to be for an artist. Own your stuff and you'll never have a problem. Yesterday I was able to freely dump 8 tracks on Audius, and I don't have anyone from a major record label breathing down my neck saying, dude, you can't, you don't own that, so you can't freely do this with that. That's the beauty of being independent. Independent is often synonymous with broke, which is not true. I mean, you can be a successful independent artist. Independent is independent, but it's kind of got that, it's like, it's got that curse to it, where, a lot of younger artists are pursuing the label deal or pursuing, the dream and stuff like that. And that's why Mousetrap has inherently been kind of a springboard platform. Well, we'll give them the 2-3 years of this and we'll service them. And of course we get some back from that, as in, we get a chunk of the masters or whatever it is, the arrangement is. And then 3 years later, off they go, Skrillex, Rez, and everyone else, and then they become independent, or they move on to major labels just because they're doing too much business. So the same thing, like, there's no NFTs in specifically. I just kind of got in late, so I'm assuming the whole panel has just been about NFTs, right?
Yeah, and listen, a good question, and I want to ask you about your first NFT so you can explain to everybody. But one of the questions that's coming up is, what traditionally do you do? Like, what is your arrangement? Like, when you talk to Mad Dog Jones and you're going to do an NFT, or you want to do one with a visual artist, what you normally do a deal where you co-own it together, and then you create it together.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the work part. But nothing really applies until the tokenization part, because that's when it becomes a thing. The work stuff can be worked out in a million different ways. For example, I have a new one coming up with Robbie Trevino, who's an amazing illustrator artist, right? And he's not a musician, but he would love his NFTs to be animated and have a soundtrack and stuff. So it's all very sliding scale. It's not like, okay, Robbie, I'm going to take 50% of all net profits. No, it's just, we work that out to whatever the number would be, right? And what I find lacking in a lot of these platforms that are kind of hosting and selling and doing all this stuff is not a not accommodating the collaborative effort. Like when you register a song on SoCan or ASCAP or anything like that, you've got a drop down list and you could just add, writers and who did what and all that stuff and what the percentages are and stuff like that. Those don't exist right now in the NFT world. It's wild, wild west. Matter of fact, Sudo had some 79 ETH dropped into his wallet. You know what he could have done legally? Nothing. He could have said, "Yep, it's mine. Okay, Joel, thanks for helping. Oh, wait, I don't see any contract in this magical internet money that says I owe you half of that." So we had to do it like, on good faith, more or less.
We've been talking about that. There's going to be a lot of legal issues with respect to this. So people that are coming, taking all these Marvel characters and they're making all this, artwork and they're putting it up on the blockchain as NFTs. These people they're going to face litigation. I mean, I was talking to some lawyers this week.
Well, that's okay because they're making millions of dollars. They can afford a decent lawyer.
I don't know.
Well, not everyone, but yeah.
Well, Joel, tell us about your first NFT. Tell us the first
what was the first one? Was the Mad Dog one? No? Or no, even before that. We did the rare.
One was with wax.io. And
the pomegranate cards.
The collectible digital pins and the characters from the pomegranate video that we made.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to do that?
I honestly, I no bullshit. Like I had no idea what the hell any of it was. And Dean said this, and he's like, this is hot. This is like, this is a really good idea. It's just like your pins, but it's online. And of course, like this was 6-7 months ago, or even maybe a year ago even. And I'm like, I don't get it, which is basically everyone right now. You know what I mean? Well, what do you mean they get an image of it? Like, can I just go and screenshot it and keep it? And he's like, no, you don't understand. And it's like, no. So he basically did the same thing that all the NFT artists are doing to at Easter dinner with their parents, So how did you make 10 grand again? How did that work? He's like, well, what do you mean? It's just a JPEG. I could go and download it. And I'm like, well, no, it's the provenance. No. So I was there. Because I had just come off the back of touring and I'm like in music mode and all that stuff. And then Dean throws this like blockchain crap at me with the pins and doing it online. And I'm like, look, you know what? Go ahead. Here's the ball. Go do the thing.
Dean's fault.
What?
It's all Dean's fault.
It is. It kind of is. And then I did some research into it, and some of it at first, I've been very cautiously optimistic about the whole trend, because I'm thinking like, geez, art galleries aren't open, restaurants aren't open. How are they laundering $200 million a week in cocaine money? And COVID, no one's going out. Like, what's going on? Where's all this magical internet money coming from? Everybody's got, $1 million in ETH, but how is that real money? And then of course, then you have to learn about all this stuff. So to truly be on top of it, you have to be a technologist, a programmer, and a day trader. And musicians aren't, and neither are digital artists mostly, and then now you're going to have to be a lawyer because, the hammer's going to come down on some of these like pieces that are going up and maybe not now, because obviously there's no, correct me if I'm wrong, but it takes about 3 to 4 months to build up a solid slam dunk case on something. Right. So we're going to start entering that realm in a couple months.
Ask Irene. It could be a day.
It could be a year. No, I mean, you know what I mean, with all the discovery and all that stuff too. And obviously it's like these prominent people are dropping these NFTs and all that stuff. And then and it goes into their, their wallets and stuff like that. But there's two things that I get a little weirded out about. Is one, okay, yeah, it's sitting in that wallet and they're either reinvesting it back in and buying and collecting themselves with the money, which is actually what I've done this week. I took 50 grand and I just pissed it away on Nifties and cool stuff that I liked, just to kind of recirculate what was there, because I know, like, if I'm Captain Paperhands and I start cashing out and then trading that ETH, well, I'm going to get nailed with 40% on tax and God knows what else. The government's going to start staring at me, because they already do, because I stand on stage with a mouse head for an hour and a half and make even more.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I don't want that kind of attention in my life.
I want to get to some questions. So Pierre, could you, Matt, can you moderate the questions?
Yeah, let me, I didn't want to cut Joel off. There's just such
No, go for it.
information coming out. Yeah, let me get to we've got a lot of questions. We're not going to get to them all, so I apologize to all the attendees, and I'm going to try to stay away from some of the more fact-specific questions. Here's one. What provisions are the NFT companies using to stop potential hacking, bootlegging, counterfeiting, and unauthorized duplication of NFTs?
Well, you can't really hack it.
It's already Nifty got hacked 2 weeks ago. Hacking, like Joel will tell you probably more than anyone on the panel, is it's going to happen, Joel. If you get it right, you're going to get hacked. You're going to get hacked.
Yeah, well, it means like, well, okay, well, there's a whole bunch of different things. Well, that's just like a DNS. So I mean, you could DDoS that site to all hell, right, and break it or whatever. But you can't hack a blockchain item. That's the point. You know, you would have to. The only way that's possible is if you literally hacked thousands and thousands of computers. It's an exercise in futility. You couldn't do it. That's why blockchain is hailed as this big secure net for the meta, right? So that's out of the question. I mean, you could DDoS the hell out of the delegate system or something like that to prevent, you know, auctions coming and going and stuff like that. That's one way to kind of interrupt stuff, but you're not necessarily able to steal someone's art, like an art heist, breaking into a museum and all that stuff too. Another thing we're going to start seeing, unfortunately, are NFTs with payloads in the meta. Which is something that hasn't really been too spoken about on all these discords and the Nifty Gateway and stuff like that. But there have been some malicious NFTs that could basically inject payloads onto your computer and do whatever the hell they want, just simply by viewing the Nifty. So there's that. It's like, imagine you go to an art gallery, you bought a Van Gogh, you took it home, it had a time bomb on the back of it, and then when you got to your house, it blew up. That's basically what you can do with an NFT.
What else? What other question?
Someone's asking if we could address just kind of briefly the practicality of enforcing IP rights in a decentralized, anonymous environment. Irene, I don't know if
the best advice is to get it when it's on the marketplace before it gets transferred to an individual owner. So, you know, to the extent that there's, you know, the platform is hosting any content, you know, copyrighted material, you do DMC takedown notice. Once the art gets, or the underlying file gets transferred, it's not that you can't enforce it. It's just often it gets associated with a wallet that has an anonymous identifier. It's hard to identify the individuals that actually own the NFTs. But, you know, through typical forensics and computer forensics, you can track that down. But it's much easier if you see it on the marketplace. Also,
you can name the platform as a defendant and then have those, and then you can issue a subpoena, or just have Go defendant and then issue a subpoena. And then
so would Etherscam serve as evidence?
As far as wallet ID, you could use like any of the blockchain analytics to figure out which wallet has an NFT, and then again, as Irene said, you know, you can either track it to the platform they bought it from, or use other computer forensics to figure out who owns that wallet.
Does anyone want to tackle how do the U.S. copyright law section 203 and 304 regarding terminations and reversions of copyright grants affect NFTs? I know Irene briefly covered work for hire, which obviously that's an exclusion for termination, so that could certainly come into play. But otherwise,
as to that question, it seems to me that there may be that confusion, because I saw a lot of folks here. Most of you, by the way, you're not like a normal lay person who are bidding on these NFTs. So you already understand that just because you buy a piece of artwork from a gallery, it doesn't mean that you're owning the IP rights, underlying IP rights. A lot of folks don't know that. So start buying this digital artwork, all of a sudden they're printing some mugs and mouse pads and think that they own the rights to reproduce or creative derivative works. So here, when we're talking about termination, 35 years later, I think that question seems to me that maybe they thought the NFT also transfers the underlying copyright. It doesn't. So it shouldn't impact the termination provision under like a 203.
I agree.
I agree.
How do we mass educate the fanatics?
We're trying.
I know. I was in
Look it
it's so funny because I have a friend who wraps vehicles, okay, Tiago. And he owns this company called Second Skin, and they wrap vehicles and stuff like that. And he joined one of these clubhouses where it was thousands of buyers and people that are very passionate and involved with the NFT scene. And he was in this clubhouse, and I was listening, and he was like lined up for a question. The person before him said, "Hey," he introduced himself. He's like, "Yeah, I'm the guy who did the Teslas in the Cybertrucks and sold it to so and so." So he like took a Cybertruck, made it an NFT, and all that stuff. And then Tiago gets up there and he says, "Hey, I have a question." And then all the experts up in the speakers room were like, "Go ahead." And he said, "Well, I wrap automobiles. Like, what are the legal implications of me, say, using, a Lamborghini or something like that, like as the car model and stuff like that?" And then they like shut him down. They're like, no, it's if you didn't get permission, you can't do it. And I almost wanted to get up on the stage and say, "You literally just said you sold like a Cybertruck. Did Elon call you and say that was cool? Like, cause I don't understand like how nobody is respecting."
Maybe they were talking about what he wrapped. So like if he wraps, like he's wrapped cars for you using your trademark. So he couldn't take that trademark, or with Meowingtons, your cat, where he wrapped a car for you for Meowingtons.
Well, it was interesting because we brought up the worst case scenario, right? He came up to me and he said, "You know what needs to be an NFT is a 3D model of the Ferrari with the Nyan Cat wrap that we did." So you're already in shit. Like, okay, Ferrari, the Nyan Cat guy who sold that image of the cat as an NFT for like 150 grand. And then, all this stuff. So it was like, I was like, that would be like a legal disaster, but I'll bet you we could do it and get away with it. Right now.
What we're doing.
No, I'm not doing it. Don't worry, Dina. I'm just saying.
I know you're.
Someone would do that, right? And they would make a pot of money. Okay. But then you've got 3 incoming, fire engulfed arrows coming for you, right?
Oh,
one from Ferrari, one from PR Guitar Man, one from
Joel. Nyan Cat's lawyers on our chat. Kia.
600K.
Kia. Yeah.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. So like, because of the car, right, that we did for the gumball was so iconic and and I think I got I'm pretty sure, I can't remember the exact circumstances, but I think I got Chris's okay to go ahead and use it on the car.
He did. Yeah.
And
yeah, he did.
Are we just saying that because she's in there? Yeah.
No, it's he knows.
No, I'm just saying.
Deal with him.
So look. So what I mean is, okay, so I mean, say we didn't have that and that car didn't exist and I fabricated that NFT and I made 100 grand. I mean, are they going to, would they come in with that? Like over the NFT space? I mean, like, I don't understand the process there because I know how they would do it in the real world, but you can't C and D something that lives on the blockchain.
What, Dean?
Well, the interesting point is we've had 2 instances now where we have issued a C and D for Deadmau5 name and likeness in an NFT.
We did for OpenSea. Remember, they took it right now.
So somebody had copied Joel's artwork that he did on a drop on Nifty Gateway and put it on OpenSea within an hour. It was up there for sale. We had to go.
Oh, they do that to everyone.
Yeah. So. It's everywhere. You're right, Joe. But
everywhere. That's the point, though. You cannot remove it.
Well, you can.
Actually, you can remove their account. You can remove their profile. You can remove the links to that. But that data is still living out there on the blockchain.
Yeah, I think that's where it's important to distinguish between the data that represents the token and the ownership versus the file. Many times the file is on a centralized database or other place, and the token just points to it. So if the file is somewhere else, you can still take it down. If it truly is like on a decentralized database like IPFS or something, that's more complicated. But it depends on the facts as to whether you can actually shut
Well,
the file down.
James, like say a settlement would be like if you did actually get a hold of that person and got their address and all that stuff, would a settlement include them providing proof of burning the NFT, meaning like sending it to a wallet of 0x00000, which means it's completely inaccessible?
It can. It can.
Guys, we've got a few questions here on disappearing NFTs. Some people have asked questions about the liability aspects of if actual content disappears at the source and what's left. Let me see. People spending money to have the actual content disappear at the source, and all that's left is a record of the transaction on the ledger. People spend money but then can't access their collectible. And then another question along those lines that I want to try to get to is the aspect of the solvency of the startup company managing the smart contract. Is there an issue if, say, Nifty or OpenSea and ultimately dissolves? What happens with the NFT the person created and managed through the platform?
Well, typically the minting is done through the platform, but the smart contract that manages the subsequent sale of tokens, that smart contract is run on a blockchain. So as long as the blockchain on which the smart contract exists, the token will and the smart contract will persist.
This is why everyone likes the security of Ethereum right now, because it's one of the biggest players in the marketplace.
Yep.
Neat.
How are we doing, Pierre? On time?
We're over time right now, so
because I have a headache.
We can go slightly overtime if you wish so.
Oh, thanks, Alex. That's the voice of the
Yeah, I'd just like to reset the room.
Oh my God.
This is Joel speaking.
You got another good question there, Pierre?
yeah, I'm trying to get through. There's some that are very fact specific that I'm
Just really quickly.
Well, that's a good one. Are the
platforms
platforms protected by DMCA safe harbor provisions?
Oh yeah, that is a good one. I think that was in the chat. I didn't see that one. Go for it. Go for that.
In general,
Irene,
yes.
what would you say? Jim, Irene?
So it
I
is
would say
protected.
nobody's protected by safe harbor. No, down.
So under 512, I see all these platforms at least register as a service provider, and they designate the agent. So there's an email address dedicated where you can send your complaints. In terms of actual enforcement, that is a whole nother story.
Right. And it's also important to understand that I think I agree with that, but I think the other part of it is that there's both curated and non-curated platforms. So like OpenSea users, it's user-generated content that they're basically posting to the site without any curation. Other sites like Super Rare and some others, they actually curate it. So if they're manually selecting the content, then under DMCA, they may not get the protection.
How do has any smart contract been used as a legally binding contract in court? I don't know if that's been.
That's a misconception. Smart contracts are neither smart nor contracts in general. Smart contract, it's a terrible name. It is an absolutely terrible name that was coined by a university professor. But the bottom line is smart contract is actually computer code. If anything, it is code that implements the business logic of a contract. So typically there's going to be some written agreement, whether it's terms of service or license or some other agreement that specifies the legal term. So very, very simple to give an example. If you say you're going to sell this token on this platform, and you're going to get 80% of the initial sale and you're going to get 10% of each subsequent sale, the smart contract will run in a way that you're going to get 80% to your wallet of the original sale, and each subsequent sale you'll get 10%. So it's the business logic that the code implements, and the smart contract code runs on a blockchain. So once it's deployed, you really can't take it down.
Any thoughts on how artist recording agreements might need to adapt to accommodate NFT rights?
Yeah, exclude NFTs from your recording agreement. That's my
Good luck
short
now. You
answer.
should have did that a year ago.
There's a simple answer.
Listen, exclude it.
Can you bundle non-NFT digital files or a literal physical token printout with an NFT sale that holds a different set of rights?
I'm not sure.
Visible confusion.
Yeah, I don't understand.
Yeah.
Not sure the question.
Let me,
I mean, I think let me try and. So we on our last drop, we did a physical and a digital version of a drop on Nifty Gateway, where we did a 1 of 50 as an NFT. And if you got the NFT, you got exactly the same in the print version that was signed by both the eyes too. I think that's probably what they mean. Is there any legal difference if you add a physical item to a digital NFT drop?
Yeah, I think that's what they were getting at.
I see. So the Nike, for example, got a patent December 2019. They filed in like December 2018. They expedited it, got a patent. So if they will be selling the physical shoe, like a footwear, associated with the digital replica, or grant the users the right to kind of breed another shoe using NFT. So there are ways to kind of create the physical associated with the digital component.
Said another way, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jim.
So an NFT can represent ownership of a physical item, if that's the question. It can be a printed item. The Chicago Department of Motor Vehicles toyed with using tokens to represent the ownership of automobiles, physical automobiles. So it's just a mechanism for recording ownership of some asset, whether it's physical or digital.
Here's one that I think maybe we can use as a wrap up. We're already well over. Do any of the panelists have policy or practice suggestions for the Copyright Office to help keep up with this new technology?
Great question. It's a great question.
Hopefully there's somebody from the Copyright Office listening.
They're trying to implement the music licensing collective right now, the Music Modernization Act, and we're throwing them into DMCA hearings. They're a little overwhelmed, but yeah, it's a good question. All of these things are evolving. I mean, that's the simplest way to put it. It's all evolving.
Anyone else want to jump on that?
Irene?
I don't think it's the policy or rule or laws or statutes. I think we have to live with what we have in reality. I think it's the enforcement. I really don't think in reality the artists of the world will benefit so much by the Copyright Office like changing their rules. I think we will benefit more from the technology side. That's why I'm more leaning toward, and I hope keeping my hopes up for the Deans and Joels of the world.
Neat.
Hey guys. Well, this has been great. I want to thank everybody again, Dina and Irene and James and Joel and Dean. Thank you guys for your time. This has been fantastic. I'm sorry to everybody who we didn't get to your questions, but there was a lot and we had a lot of information we wanted to cover. Thanks again, guys. Great.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoyed it.
Bye.